Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the latest installment of Novel at Home, a series of virtual author events bringing authors to your living room or your home office or wherever you're leisure zooming these days. Your support is so valuable to a small business like ours, especially during challenging times like these, and we appreciate you being with us tonight. For those of you outside the Memphis area, you should know that there's an unusually large amount of snow and ice on the ground, very, very cold temperatures as well. But thanks to the miracle of modern technology and the fact that we've been Zooming for a year now, the show goes on. It's a little bittersweet though, because Mark's launches have become kind of one of our favorite annual traditions when his New York team comes down and we pack the house. We feel hopeful that next year we'll have a normal one, but we're glad that we can be together in any form. So thanks y'all for being here. And now without further delay, I'm thrilled to welcome tonight's guests. Joshua Hood is the author of 4 novels, including 2 military thrillers, Warning Order and Clear by Fire, as well as 2 CIA thrillers inspired by Robert Ludlum's Bourne universe. The latest is Robert Ludlum's The Treadstone Exile, which was released just this month. And the novel has signed copies that you can pick up in store or online. Thanks for coming by, Josh.
Oh, it wasn't that far for a walk.
Like Mark, Josh is based in the Memphis area, and our store has been fortunate enough to host his previous book events. And again, we'll look forward to a better day in maybe 2022 for all of that. Josh is a University of Memphis alum who joined the Army after graduation. A decorated combat veteran who served in both Iraq and Afghanistan, Josh became a sniper team leader on a full-time SWAT team in Memphis after returning to civilian life. Now a full-time writer, husband, and father of 2, Novel is proud to welcome him tonight. Josh will be in conversation with Mark Greaney, our man of the hour. Mark is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of 18 novels. If I got my count right, is that right, Mark?
18? Well, I was ghostwriter on a couple, so this is my 20th actual publication, but only 18 I can talk about. So you're right. You're right enough.
Those include 7 Tom Clancy novels, 3 of which he wrote with the author himself before taking over the series after he died. He also wrote a military thriller called Red Metal with Lieutenant Colonel Rip Rawlings. And then this is his 10th Gray Man novel, Relentless. It was released today. A feature film adaptation of The Gray Man is in production with Netflix, starring Ryan Gosling in the title role. In his research for the Gray Man and Jack Ryan novels, Mark has traveled to dozens of countries, visited the Pentagon, military bases, and many Washington, D.C. intelligence agencies. He's trained alongside military and law enforcement in the use of firearms, battlefield medicine, and close-range combative tactics. Mark lives right here in Memphis, Tennessee with his wife, his 3 stepchildren, and his 3 dogs, Lobo, Ziggy, and Winston. If you follow him on Instagram, you might catch a look at them. We're so honored to have you both with us tonight. After Mark and Josh wrap up their discussion, we'll open things up to an audience Q&A. Use the audience Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen and feel free to enter questions at any time. Even if they don't get to answer them till later, you're welcome to enter them whenever. Audience, let's give Mark and Josh a warm virtual welcome.
We'll pretend like we hear clapping. No, it's great to be here, and thanks for doing this, Josh. I really appreciate it.
Oh, this is, I just realized, the first one. I think the first Gray Man novel. Well, actually, it was a Davis Kidd event that I've missed in person. Besides, other times. So it's weird to think what a staple Davis Kidd, now novel, and Mark Greaney have become. And when she was talking, it got me thinking about how 2020 has kind of been, a crappy year for some, but not for you. Like 2020 has been your year. And I say that because, you wrote an Audible short that's getting turned into a movie also, on top of Gray Man, on top of the success that followed Red Metal and quite a few other things. But it leads me into my first question. Like, let's say it's hard to believe that anybody out there has not read a Gray Man book. This is the 10th one. They've grown in scope and success with each one. But let's say, theoretically, there is one person just kind of going through a bookstore, and they come upon this cover, and they say, "Oh, it's his, #1 New York Times. It's his 10th book." What would you say to them? Why should they pick this book up when so many people are hesitant to start, in midstream of a series? What would you say to that? Like, why should they pick them up?
I would say that I am a reader first and foremost myself, and I have picked up books, and I know you picked up books, Josh. I'm sure you and I have had conversations, not in public, about picking up somebody's book that is part of a series, and the first one you read is book 3 or book 8 or whatever, and going, what the heck is going on here? Or at least feeling like, okay, this book is an after action report of what happened in the last book, or at least the first third of the book is. So from the very beginning, or from once I turned this into a series, from book, once I wrote the second book on Target in 2010, I decided that, okay, every book is going to be a standalone, because when book 5 comes out, if I'm so lucky, and book 10 comes out if I'm so lucky, I can't ask people to be like, I'm going to need you to read the first 9 to know what's going on. So there is a larger story arc if you do read the entire series, but you don't suffer at all from picking up Relentless, book 10. It basically throws you right into the action, and you understand enough about who the players are. I like to start, every book with action, and I don't like to start with a lot of exposition. So at the beginning of this book, my hero he's a former CIA paramilitary officer who now is a kind of a contract agent for the CIA, and he's injured. And at the beginning of the book, he's sort of yanked out of a CIA medical facility and thrown back into the field. And you follow right along with him, looking over his shoulder as that happens to him, and he starts to put the pieces of this puzzle together. That he has a kind of a global mystery, kind of international mystery to unravel. And it's a book with a lot of intrigue and a lot of espionage, tons of action, and as was book 2 and 3 and 5 and 8 and all the others. But again, you don't have to read it as a series. You can go back and read book 1 if you want, and after the fact, but you can pick this one up and right there in midstream and follow along with what's going on.
And that's what I've always loved about these books, and I think it's kind of like the hallmark of a true craftsman. I'm going to step on some toes for a second, but I feel like I was a big fan of Vince Flynn growing up, but I felt that he had like this cut and paste paragraph that went into every book, and it's like, here we go again. Like, it explains who the reader, the main character Mitch Rapp was, et cetera, and it's just like, all right, let's tidy everything up. And a lot of times it left you feeling like, well, damn, like, what did I miss? With this book in particular, and all of your books, like, I read 1 minute out, and as a fan, I loved it. As an author, we've talked about how I've picked it apart and like all the crazy things, the great things that were going on there. And then we get to Relentless, and you somehow manage to begin this book where just enough familiarity, like, oh, he got stabbed, and he's got this problem, like you said, and he's moving on. But at no time do you kind of leave the reader feeling like they've missed out on something, like, oh, I can't go forward. And that's a real skill to have written so many books. This is number 10, yet each one is fresh, has a fresh feeling. Like, I feel that Relentless is the most mature Gray Man book. I feel that the tone's different. We talked a little bit about that in the past. And
yeah,
what did you do to, some people just, hey, I'm going to try a different opening or something else. You changed so much of this book, specifically, your voice, what I call your voice, and the tone in this. Can you talk a little bit about that? Did you think about that going into it, or did it just happen?
It more or less just happened. I mean, part of it is you mature as an author as you go on. I went back to listen to the audiobook of the first Gray Man, which I hadn't done since it came out, and I haven't read it because I needed some information for the book that I'm writing now, which is next year's Gray Man book. And I was pleasantly surprised because in my head it was a thinner story because my stories have gotten a little bit bigger and richer and deeper. I was pleasantly surprised that although it's a very tight action novel that everything takes place over a 3-day period, I didn't eliminate some of that texture that I like in a book, the sort of that you're talking about. But this book, Relentless, it takes place in Berlin. A large part of it does, and I wanted it to be different from my other books, and I wanted it to have more of a spy novel, almost a Cold War spy novel feel to it. I didn't outline this book much at all, which I do sometimes, and sometimes I don't. This one was pretty much seat of the pants, although I had this general idea that it was going to be kind of this dark noir Cold War feel because it's taking place in Berlin, and half of the really good spy novels that I've read growing up take place in Berlin, and a lot of the nonfiction about espionage that I've read takes place in Berlin.
She showed a different part of Berlin. I felt that this was a side of Berlin that I'd never seen before. And to answer one question that's already come in and to kind of piggyback on what you're talking about, Zoya, as a male author, it's hard to sometimes, describe women. And one thing that you did here that I haven't seen or noticed you do before is you anchor a scene in Berlin in a very fresh way by talking about what she's wearing as she's like walking into this room. And so instead of the usual setup of being like, oh, the building looks like this, we're immediately anchored by what she's wearing. And so Bob wants to know backstory on how you came up with her. And from that, how were you able to take that, that initial idea and carry and create such a character that, I mean, she really immediately captures my attention in Women It Out and in Relentless. Every time she's on, what I consider the screen, it is she's captivating. Where did she come from?
Well, gosh, I wanted to have Court to have I wanted there to be a female in the series who was a foil to Court, not necessarily an enemy or an adversary. They could have a relationship that is in flux, let's say. So I kind of had that general idea, and I was going to make her Mossad. And then I decided, well, what if I made her SVR? I wrote a book called Gunmetal Gray, which was the book 6 in the Gray Man series. And that's where Zoya was introduced. And in that book, Court is in Hong Kong trying to find a missing person. And this group of Russian operatives are trying to find the same person. And she's part of that other group. But she gets things happen, and she and Court end up teaming up. And then I'd found my Zoya, I'd found the person that was going to be Court's foil. I wanted to make her as intelligent, as resourceful. She has tools in her toolbox that he doesn't have. He has tools in his toolbox that she doesn't have. And in the scene that you mentioned in Relentless, where she's introduced in the story, again, it's a standalone. You don't have to know anything that happened in Gunmetal Gray or Mission Critical or the other books where she's appeared. You just see her walking into a meeting at the Hotel Adlon in Paris, in Berlin, which is like a really nice hotel. I've been there before. I didn't stay because it was too expensive to spend the night, but I've walked through there. I've walked around in there, and no one threw me
how
out.
expensive does that have to be where you can't?
Well,
I mean, you mentioned how expensive it is in the book, but
Yeah, it was pretty pricey, but I wanted to show her. It wasn't so much showing her the specifics of the clothing she was wearing. I just wanted to show her looking and feeling confident and going into this situation with all the confidence in the world. And she is this formidable person, physically and intellectually. And that was just how I want to do it. You and I've talked about this before. It's like, you don't want to start every scene the same way. It's easy to say it's raining, or it's not raining, or it's hot, or it's cold, or it's 4:30 p.m. or whatever. But there's a lot of ways that you should start a scene to keep the book fresh itself. And that was something I hadn't done that much. And what do I know about women's fashion? Very little. So I asked questions. I don't know a lot about flying helicopters, so I reach out to somebody in the 160th to get information on helicopters, for example. It's the same thing. I reached out to some people that my wife, who actually helped me by reaching out to a friend of hers who kind of got me through that scene. I don't, it's my job to know things, or it's at least my job to look like I know them, to describe them. It's like Jean-Luc Hurray said, a book doesn't have to be factual, it just has to be credible. And I'm trying to make it credible with that scene.
But you knew to look there, and like that's the fascinating part. Talk about Gunmetal Gray. I remember the scene where they're trying to escape, and they're like below. There's this rock face or whatever, and she's helping him, and he can barely hold on. And then there's like a animalistic attraction that hits there, but then we see her kind of grow along with Court. And here we see her very refined, and we see Court very weak. We see Court is always he can rely on himself. He's a singleton operator. That's his specialty. He's a gray man, and in this book and in every other book, the mere mention of his name kind of scares the shit out of a lot of these people. But in this one, you've done something different yet again. Besides the way you're setting scenes, the way you're pacing the book. We have like a Court who starts off tired and beat down, and it kind of goes along with that tone we were talking about, is that you even somehow get the voice of the book to reflect how beat down he is. And we talked yesterday about how you'd gone through a similar infection on your foot, and so you knew physically what that would do to a guy. Were you scared that he might run out of gas? Because he's in rough shape starting off, and then this is a big book. You start getting into it, there's action right off. He's getting kind of put through his paces. Were you worried that, like, damn, I might have started him off a little too close to E?
Yeah, I was. It was important to me that he faces, he's made vulnerable by things other than people trying to chop his head off or shoot him in the face. That when you write a series this long, you want there to be different angles of the story. And also it's important for me for there to be skin in the game. You might know that when you watch a James Bond film, that James Bond's not going to get hit by a bus and die in the opening credits. You still go see it, but you go see it because there is this belief that he is imperiled, and I want to show different ways that have how my hero is imperiled. So the previous book, he got stabbed in the clavicle, and in this book I opened it with him suffering lingering effects from that wound. I wanted him to have that vulnerability, have to use his wits as he builds his strength back up, and also have to manage this problem as just another problem he has to deal with, and it really shows his grit and determination. Just like anybody else, I like those action novels where you have a square-jawed, steely-eyed hero that kicks a lot of ass, and this book definitely has that. But there's, with the entire Gray Man series, the Murphy's Law probably plays into my series more than a lot of other series, where the hero has got things he has to deal with, just to get to the big dance, just to get to the action. He's got to fight his way there, and this was just another example of that.
So how do you keep it fresh? I mean, we've talked about you try to change up, different way you start scenes, try to, put the guy in different situations. But we're basically telling, there's 7 basic plots. Everybody's telling the same story. When you get to book 10 and I focus on action scenes. So I'm like, okay, what's something I haven't done before? Eventually you reach the line where you're like, I've done it all. How do you keep it fresh? How do you keep, let's say specifically with Relentless, where did this germinal idea for the book come from?
I read an article, and this is how I keep things fresh. It's like the first few books, you have all these ideas. You have your whole life to think of these ideas. If you're interested in writing or you're interested in this type of a story, which I was, and then you tell all those stories. And then writing 7 Tom Clancy books in 6 years on top of the Gray Man books, it's like you've gone down all these different alleyways that you could imagine, and then you just have to go and find out something new and learn something new and build from that. And so I was looking for something to write about for my 10th Gray Man book, and I'd read an article about how the CIA does not collect intelligence on the United Arab Emirates. We have an agreement with them. We stood up their intelligence shop, and we have an agreement to where we don't spy on them because they're an ally of ours in the Middle East. We need allies in the Middle East, et cetera. So we've made that decision that we don't spy on them. And I thought to myself, well, how could that come back and bite us in the ass? And, tensions are really high with the US and Iran. So I thought of that immediately. The UAE is a Sunni nation. They see Iran's growth in the region as a hegemonic power, I guess, in Yemen as being very, very dangerous. So to the extent that the UAE is fighting a war with Iran, or Iran proxies and UAE proxies are fighting a war in Yemen. And so I dug into that more and more. I thought that would be an interesting backdrop. I wanted to tell a Berlin Cold War style story, but I figured, I understood how I could make this based in Berlin. But as I looked into it more, I realized, the UAE several years ago started a company called Dark Matter, and they did a lot of cyber intelligence around the world, and they would hire people from the CIA and from the NSA and from the Mossad and from British intelligence and German intelligence, and they would all go to Dubai and work. I think it was Dubai, maybe Abu Dhabi. I think in Abu Dhabi they'd go work, and they began spying on Americans or other Westerners. They were using a cyber hacking tool called Karma that was like a hacking phone.
Funny name, since we decided we're not going to spy on them, and they're
yeah, exactly. So in that way, it kind of like worked against us. Also, the UAE, as I dug deeper into it, saw that they are using mercenaries in their war in Yemen, including American former military SF guys. And they are using them doing sort of not just direct action missions, but targeted killings. They're using American guys essentially as assassins in Yemen in their war. And as I read about that, I mean, every time you read something like that, you're like, well, that's going in the book. It's the real world. I don't have to, I don't have to concoct something. So this Dark Matter company turned into a German-based company that was being hired by the UAE, and the book just sort of like came from there. Initially, I wanted to do a book in Berlin, and I wanted there to be double crosses and triple crosses and all those things that you love from like an old Le Carré book, and yeah, that's where I got the initial idea for it.
So you knew that you wanted to do something in Berlin, and I'm going to ask this question for all the writers out there, because we're already getting questions and comments, and we've answered one kind of craft question with saying that you have an outline. You don't outline a lot in the past, you're outlining now. So the second one is, you had the idea that you wanted to have it in Berlin, and then you begin to do research. You come across this pretty awesome company, Dark Matter, that leads you down the rabbit hole. What was the bridge going into it at that point? Did you know, okay, now I need a bridge that connects these two? And were you were you able to place Zoya in there, or were you like, hey, you know, Zoya, I liked writing about her. I'd like to put her in the book, or was that just totally spontaneous? Like, hey, I could use her to kind of join these two worlds.
Yeah, you know,
hope.
I love reading novels where there's several plot lines that you don't see how they're going to intersect, but then they intersect in ways that are exciting. So I just, as a reader, I just like that. And so I have Court on this mission trying to find and interrogate / eliminate an American intelligence officer who's stolen some secrets down in Caracas, Venezuela. And at the same time, we show Zoya Zakharova in Berlin getting hired by this company, this sort of shadowy, shady company. And she learns very quickly how shadowy and shady they are. And she's been sent by the CIA to kind of investigate and see what's up with these people. The CIA has no idea, Zoya has no idea just how dark this company is and who their ties are with. But as Court is down in Venezuela and assassins come raining down to silence the guy he's going to interrogate, it leads him back to Berlin, and that sort of threads the whole plot line together. And so that less of there being a bridge, I just like the stories where different plot lines dovetail together, and so you just figure out a way to make these things intersect in ways that are interesting.
All right, looking at some of these other questions. I've had someone wants to know what you're drinking.
Oh, it's
like
just
Tang, right?
it's just, what'd you say, Tang? It's just Jameson, Irish whiskey. It's nothing very exciting, but
Yeah.
it's always on hand.
Always on hand. So let's
Well,
talk.
not
go
at
back
noon,
to COVID. We
you
kind
know,
of
like
started
not
with
at.
that.
All right, sorry, go ahead.
Maybe at my house. I mean, I'm not judging you. I'm just saying, like, whatever. Sometimes you just have a bad writing day, and you're like, you know, it's bad when they start recognizing you at the liquor store with a mask on. I've reached that problem, and I'm just like, I'm a writer. Don't worry about it. And they're like, okay,
Yeah,
that's
right.
cool. But speaking of COVID and excessive alcohol, I've been able to travel with you once before on a research trip, but obviously due to all this craziness, you haven't been able to travel. And so you've been to Berlin and you were able to kind of use your experience in the past, but not Venezuela and some of these other places. And so my question is, for a new author, anybody out there, you know, you get a lot of people that say, oh, you know, these guys are making a lot of this crap up. Like, I bet if you hadn't explained where you got the idea of Shrike and, you know, everything else, there's probably somewhere some dude down in his basement with a tinfoil hat on being like, that could never happen, you know. But it's, you know, this is a job, right? We like take this seriously. You travel, you do your research. What is the payoff for you traveling, physically being there versus Google? And how was that kind of flipped with this COVID where you weren't able to go there?
Yeah, I've had this conversation with my buddy Brad Taylor before, who also likes to travel to these locations. Like the reason we do it is because when we do it, we realize that our preconceived notions were so wrong that when you go there and you get so much like very specific, like the atmospherics of what it's like there, and but at the same time you get a lot of just like detail that goes right into the book, or it gives you a lot of ideas, and it really does help the story. And so Relentless is my 20th published novel. I did 7 Clancy novels. I did a book called Red Metal, and I've done 10 Gray Man novels, but I was also, early in my career, I was a ghostwriter, and I did 2 novels that way. Out of all those books, I think this is really only the second time I didn't do any physical location research. And it's tough, but yeah, I've lived in Germany, and I know Berlin well, and I was there researching a Clancy book. So I'm glad that I picked Berlin and didn't pick Madagascar or someplace I've never been, because that would have really been hard to pull off. A few years ago, when I wrote Gunmetal Gray, I had a trip planned to Thailand and Vietnam and Hong Kong. I was real excited about going there and scuba diving and researching my book. And then I had to have some surgery on my ankle, so I wasn't able to go. But I'd been to Hong Kong before, and so I was kind of able to sort of piggyback on my knowledge of Asia. I'd spent a few weeks there, but I hadn't been to Thailand or Vietnam. And you just do the research that you have to do to make it work. It's always better when you can go, but it's not always feasible. I've written books that take place in North Korea, and I didn't go to North Korea, or in Sudan, I didn't go to Sudan. So it doesn't always happen, but it's always good for you when you can do it.
But you're the one who sold me on it, because you know, a couple of books I'd written in the Middle East, and you're like, you've been to one like shitty desert, you've been to them all. They all smell the same, you know, you get it. And then we went to, you know, London and Scotland, and it was like, I was thinking of something in my head because I was working on a totally separate book at the time. And when I got there, I was like, well, crap, that's not going to work, because the metro station's actually on the west side of the city. And so after that, you know, I wanted to travel more. But then, you know, it's kind of like the great places I want to set a book. It's like my wife's like, you're not going to, you know, Congo. It's not happening.
Yeah.
You're not going to Haiti or whatever. But for me, it's always, I didn't realize it until I'd come back from there. It's like, it's so much easier to throw the little nuance things, kind of like you did with Zoya and her clothes, that anchor a scene when you're able to be like, oh, it smelled like this, or, you know, it felt like this. It was, you know, it was cold, as opposed to, for me, it's hard to get into scenes sometimes if I don't know, you know, what it looks like, what it feels like, etc. And I think that's something that's like a valuable, you know, you could spend all day on Google trying to figure crap out. And then when you go someplace, you can use that experience for that book, but also for other books. And it's one of the things that I didn't realize, but that you could really tell in Relentless, because there's little mentions of certain things that really seal the deal. You know, it's like, you're not going to find like, oh, you used the wrong beer there or whatever, because it's well researched. And I mean, I couldn't tell that you didn't go there. I was like, dude, is this guy sneaking out on freaking COVID?
During COVID, yeah. Well, I lived in Cologne for a while, and which isn't Berlin, but you know, I visited Berlin enough to where, you know, just my knowledge of Germany came through. The last time I was there was 3 years ago. I went to Munich with Rip when I was writing Red Metal, and I love Germany a lot. I used to speak pretty good German, but it would have been better. Like, I wanted to do a book in Berlin because I basically wanted to rent an apartment and live in Berlin for a month, you know, and or 6 weeks or something. And that started it all off when I wrote a book called Deadeye several years ago. I wanted to go to Sweden because I saw the girl with the dragon tattoo, and Sweden looked really cool. And so I went in December, and there was, you know, blizzards and all this other stuff. And it was such a neat research trip. But the whole idea for the book came from the fact that it's like, hey, I get to go where I want to go and write about what I want to write. Let's base a book in Sweden. The book turned out good. I mean, it turned out like it was relevant to be in Sweden. I've read books before by other authors where, you know, they're in Libya or they're somewhere, and I'm thinking, well, it reads like they're in a strip mall in Cincinnati or something. Like there's nothing that really anchors you to the location in a way that I think is good to, you know, it's good for the reader. Like you really want to, you want the reader to believe that what they're reading, words on a page, are they're actually experiencing, and the closer you can get to that, the better.
I mean, yeah, you don't want to be like full of shit, you know. And it's like, for me, you can start reading stuff and you're just like this guy's, he's talking about Tempe, Arizona. You know, you try to be Yemen and whatever. Like, I actually had to look up. I get sometimes, I'm like, I'll read a book and I'll be like, that's not right. And I rarely do it with yearbooks, but you caught me with this one. I was like, there's no pine trees in Venezuela. Like, I'm going to gig him. And then I'm reading and I was like, well, I'll be damned. There is pine trees, and so those are like, that's the thing that gives back about a book. You're reading stuff, but I love to read something and learn. And before I get too far off topic here, if it's cool with you, I got some questions stacking up.
Let's do them.
We'll take a break. All right. Let's see here. Teresa says, you changed the first person with book 9, which was 1 minute out. What made you change, and do you continue to do this with book 10?
No, book 10 is in third person. Book 9 was in first person. I felt like at least the first half of the book, the hero is not, Court is always best when you can understand what he's thinking and why he's doing it. And there's 3 ways you can do that. One way is you can have the narrator tell you everything that's going on in his head. Another way is for him to have dialogue with somebody. He's playing off of another character, and they're arguing about something. He's explaining the hows and the whys and the concerns he has or whatever. And then the other way is to do it in first person. Well, the narrator option is the easy way out. The dialogue option is good, and that's what I sort of normally do, because there is this cast of characters that bounce back into Court's world for that purpose. But in this story, the way I figured out how I wanted to write this story about him following this human trafficking network across Europe and all the way back to the US, I knew that he was going to be kind of on his own large portions of the time. So I decided to write the book in first person. I'm really happy with it. It hit #1 on the New York Times list. 2% of people on Amazon hated it, that I'd switch to first person. And I mean, I scratched my head. I mean, like, people say, like, I hate first person. I'm like, so you hate The Great Gatsby, you hate Moby Dick, you hate, I don't know, some Jack Reacher books. There's so many good first person novels that it's like saying you hate first person in a book to me is like saying you hate symphonies in F minor or something.
It's like saying you hate chocolate ice cream. It's like,
well,
okay,
I mean, it's
don't buy chocolate ice cream.
Yeah, it's just a generalization to me. But the people that didn't like it, very passionately didn't like it, I still might do it again, because I felt like it worked for the story. And obviously the book was really well received. But it's funny, on Amazon, as is the way on Amazon reviews, people will say, just like everybody else, I had a problem with the first person. And you look down, and 91% of the people gave it 4 or 5 stars, and 3% of the people gave it 1 or 2 stars. So I'm like, well, not just like everybody. And I actually had a lady send me an email, and she's like, you should look at your Amazon reviews, and that should, inform you on how to write these books. And I said, okay. I just went and did it, and 90% of the people liked me doing it, and you and 25 others didn't. So I guess I'm good, right?
Yeah,
it was just a choice I made for
76.
that book. Yeah, it was a choice I made for that book, and that there was a backlash. 1 out of 100 people, but like everything else in life, we all know, if the backlash is strong enough, 1 out of 100 people can have an outsized voice. And I'm not saying that you can't not like the book. I mean, there's lots of reasons not to like any of my books, but I don't think throwing it out, throwing out a book because of the fact that it's written in first person, it seems a little narrow-minded to me personally.
Well, for me, as an author, and you're going into your 9th book, you're like, I'm going to write this one, and I'm going to change what has been a working formula. That takes a lot of balls to do that, because and then on top of that, it hit #1. And so, like they say, don't read your reviews. Like, sometimes when I'm whatever, I'll catch myself. I'm like, let's go check this out. And I immediately regret it, because people are like, my favorite ones for Treadstone is like, damn you, Joshua Hood, for stealing Robert Ludlum's name to further your own career. And you're like,
Yeah.
You know, I would get sued if I did that. You know, they
Of course,
actually
yeah.
like go out there.
So the
Like,
same
"Oh, I'm
thing
just gonna-"
happened when I was writing Tom Clancy novels. You would get the rando guy who will say like, you know, you stole his name and put it on the cover of your book. And I was like, I mean, I think I'd probably steal J.K. Rowling's name if I could steal anybody's name in 2014 or whenever
There's
they
no
said this.
wizards in here.
You know, and so yeah, it doesn't work like that. But you know, I have learned something over the past 12 years is that sometimes people on the internet are not correct in what they say, and so it's been kind of an eye-opening experience for me. But it's all good.
So Tom Colgan says there was a time when Berlin was the setting for espionage novels. Is there one place that you think that applies to today? If not, are there places that draw you back more than others?
That's a good
Tom.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think espionage novels based in DC can be like super exciting. Backblast was my fifth Gray Man book, and it was based in
One
DC.
of my favorites.
Thank you. And I would love to do another DC book. I like the idea of Turkey, the East meets West, the kind of crazy, the crazy political climate. There's a lot to look at Turkey and go like, wow, that would be really cool. I would like to do another Hong Kong book because of everything that's going on in Hong Kong. It won't be for a while because my sixth Gray Man, I was only 4 books ago I was there. So it'll be some other time. But yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I would say like Ankara or Istanbul, DC, places like that are like maybe the Berlin of today. And Berlin is still the center of Europe and totally valid for that sort of a thing. But you know, the Cold War is officially over, and you know, I would say probably the East meets West aspect of Turkey is fascinating.
That kind of dovetails into this other one. Sorry, I'm scrolling through all these cool questions. Yeah. Where's somewhere that you have not been would like to go? And you had Turkey and
Japan for sure. I thought I would have done.
I thought you'd been to Japan.
No, I haven't. I've been to China, and I've been to Hong Kong. I've been to Beijing and to Hong Kong. I would desperately love to go to Japan. The plan is I'm writing a book, the sequel to Red Metal, with my friend Rip Rawlings. It came out in 2019, big military thriller. That one took place in Europe. We're doing a sequel that takes place in Asia.
Great book.
Thank you very much. And the idea is to go to Japan. We'll see if COVID lets us go later this year or how that's going to work. But I would love to do a Gray Man novel in Japan as well. I think there's just so much fodder there. It's something different. You know, you said earlier, like I have this, I don't know what you said, system, or like, you know, I have this formula that's been working from book to book, and I changed it to go first person. I mean, to me, the formula that I have is that it's real important to me that this book isn't like the last book or like anything else that I've written. And I guess someday that will become impossible, but I have other ideas that are very, very different. And settings, you know, changing the setting is really, you know, a cool way to do that. So Japan would be my first choice. I would love to, like South Africa is very interesting to me, or not necessarily South Africa, maybe Namibia or some other place down there. But that's interesting to me as well. So I'm not going to run.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Japan too. That's a great one.
Yeah, I'm not going to run out of like fascinating places to travel to write Gray Man books. I mean, I will put him anywhere. You know, I would love to like do a Gray Man book. You know, you know when I'm old,
like Moonraker.
Well, yeah. So that's the jump the shark moment where the hero goes into space, and I kind of had this idea of a Gray Man book, and I might use it, so I'm probably ruining it for people. where there's something with a space launch and you think that the gray man is going to like get caught on the spaceship and go up to the space station or whatever, but he doesn't. You know, it launches and he's not on board, and give people this fear that I'm about to jump the shark with something, you know, absolutely ridiculous.
Well, I mean, like, how ridiculous though? Like, you have Elon Musk, and I mean, I was thinking about that the other day. Like, the fascinating thing of like corporations sending, you know, rockets into space. Like,
yeah,
that's not science fiction anymore. That's really happened. And
yeah,
like,
10
you know,
years from now, that might be an obvious thing to do in a gray man book, and I might do just that. That's for sure.
So pivoting from the gray man on the page to the gray man on the screen, Amanda Baldwin wants to know, are you a part of the movie process, Mark? Are they asking for your opinion on the movie? And what have you been able to tell them, if they did ask your opinion?
I am not officially, I have no role whatsoever with the movie. When Joe and Anthony Russo started writing the script, they had me come out to Los Angeles for a few days, and we talked about the character and where the series goes and all that sort of thing. That was several years ago. Joe wrote a script that was fantastic. Joe Russo wrote a script that was just really fantastic. And of the 4 screenplays that had been written for the Gray Man at that point, it was the closest to what was actually on the page. So I have a good relationship with them. They've reached out to me about other things over the years, and I'm standing by if they need anything. But I kind of feel that if the director wants to know what the author thinks about the book, about the author's thoughts on what the story should be, they should read the book, which of course they've read the book. So they know what I think about this story. I know, I read all the time, people are like, you can't let them change anything. And I appreciate people saying that, because that means they really love the book, and that makes me very happy. But realistically, the directors are artists, and the actors are artists, and the screenwriters are artists, and the cinematographer is an artist. And it is not their job to look at a sheet of a page in The Gray Man that I wrote in 2009 and perfectly replicate that on Netflix. They're going to put their artistic vision into things, and that involves changing things in the screenplay and the way the characters are and interact. I haven't read the actual shooting script, so I don't really know what's in store, but I implicitly trust them to make this really cool book. I remember Joe Russo telling me, he's like, we want this to be just this book that, this film that people are just blown away that the Russo brothers did, because it's so different from things they had done before. And the screenplay that Joe wrote that I read, absolutely, did exactly that.
And those dudes are like legit anyway. It's not like some indie guy that's like, my first movie, after I directed Bottle Rocket, I'm going to go out here and do The Gray Man or whatever. Bottle Rocket was a great movie.
Yeah, don't diss Bottle Rocket. This is no place to diss
I'm sorry.
Rocket.
That was it was the first thing that came into my mind.
Yeah.
And then
everybody's going to go watch Bottle Rocket expecting it to be some sort of Gray Man type of a story, and it is not.
No, it's nothing like that. I was I'd watched God, what was that movie? It wasn't Rushmore, but the one he wrote after that, directed after that. It's nothing to do. Do not watch Bottle Rocket. Think it's a Gray Man.
But watch it. But watch it anyway.
Yeah, but watch it, because he's great. But now I totally forgot what the hell I was saying. But good thing we have another great question from Bob. He wants to know, how do you view Matt Hanley? At times, I'm on the verge of hating him. Then I'm back to thinking he's the right guy for his role.
Well, he plays a big role in Relentless, and there are reasons to hate him, and there's reasons to understand him. And I see him. That's a good question. How do I view him? I see him as a guy who is focused on the big picture, and the big picture is not court gentry staying alive. It is court gentry being used and abused as much as it takes to save America or save the world, or fulfill the president's requests of the Central Intelligence Agency. So all of us who read a Gray Man book are in court, looking through Court Gentry's eyes or over his shoulder, or however you want to call it. But Matt Hanley is not. Matt Hanley sees Court as this asset who has done and done and done for him and survived so much and accomplished so much, and he respects him. I mean, he's not playing him for out of any malice or anything like that, but he sees Court as an asset that he needs to exploit to the best of his ability, if that makes sense. And I think that really happens in the intelligence field and the military field and in the corporate field. You know, there's the better you are at your job, the more you're going to have people just glom on and push you forward. And I think that's kind of a universal thing. It's just done on this scale where you can get yourself killed in a Gray Man novel.
But it's not really a one-way street either, because in 1 minute out, like, Court kind of screws him over. And
yeah,
you know, thinking about it, like when I was reading that part of the book, I was like, damn, it's so cold. You know, he's like in a hospital, and he doesn't care because he's, you know, looking at the 30,000 foot level, like, is this one guy versus extra whatever. But you know, you start to think about, basically there are, like, you know, different sides of the same coin, right? They both have to make these hard decisions, but you know, I found myself being like, man, that's kind of cold after everything that, you know, he's done for you, and you kind of try to screw him. But it works in a way because, you know, it like you said, I didn't even think of that. Like, we're reading Court and we see, you know, everything from Court's eyes, but Matt Hanley doesn't. And the fact that instead of him being this paper cutout that kind of, you know, like, oh, this is the president or whatever, he plays an active role, and that's constantly changing in every book is something that's really fresh too.
Yeah, if the book was about the series was about Matt Hanley and Court was this asset, you know, you might see things sort of different. It's just like another weird reference.
That'd be a badass book.
Not as weird as Bottle Rocket, but if you've watched Cobra Kai, you take the Karate Kid and kind of flip it. Yeah, I love it. And you flip it, and the Johnny, who's the bad guy in Karate Kid, now you see him from a different viewpoint. You know, sort of like he plays more sympathetic
like
role.
Macchio.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's
what a
cool.
punk selling
that's cool writing to do that. That's cool writing.
Well, I mean, now you got me thinking, dude, I'd love to see a book where, from his point of view, you know, because it would offer different things, but because that's why you make the big bucks. Like, I wish I'd come up with that idea.
Who knows?
Neil Small wants to know, what kind of infection does Court have? Was it?
Well, I can answer. It's osteomyelitis. Yeah, I know that. Because,
was it really?
Yeah. Is that what he wrote?
Yeah, he says if you're allowed to say.
Yeah. It's osteomyelitis. I had it. I had a bad surgery or bad recovery from a ankle surgery 4 years ago, and I got osteomyelitis and had to go to an infusion clinic 7 days a week for an hour, rain or shine. I was on crutches. Pretty awful thing. And I remember at the time thinking, like, you know, if you really want to portray your hero in an accurate light, you know, with all the damage that you give him, someday a dirty knife is going to stab him in the bone or something like that. So I do want to stress, for if there is anyone on the fence about whether or not to get this book, the book is not about osteomyelitis. Osteomyelitis is, you know, bone infection does not play a central role. It's not a character, but at the same time, you know, it just shows the hero having to manage this other vulnerability while he has to go. And he, you know, in this book, he's up against mercenaries and assassins, you know, Russian assassins and terrorists. And, you know, there's freedom fighters, there's weaponized drones in this book. You know, there's tons of action. It's not one about a guy convalescing from wounds from his previous book, but you see that he does have to manage that at the same time.
Well, I thought that was fascinating because, like, I've always wanted to write a book, and I don't think there's enough of it. Like, seeing him the day after, you know, like God, I just saved the world. And he's in like this, you know, bathtub with ice all over him, just like chewing 800 milligram ibuprofen and drinking vodka. And, that's the human toll of the realism, that, I try to bring, I know you try to bring, but
man, that's
you get to
basically my
see
life. That's my life now. And I'm not an international assassin. So
you're like the Joe Namath Nuprin commercial, like he's getting out of bed. He's like, I need to nuke it. And but in a world where it's kind of like you have these, superheroes. I read a book not too long ago, big author, where, the protagonist gets shot in the chest with a 38, but his like bulging pec like stops the bullet. And you're like, give me a break. That's a real, like, this guy's,
yeah,
big author. And I'm like, that shit doesn't work, like
Yeah.
we get older and these guys put, a beating on their body, and to see that is great. But then to go on the journey with him as his, this weapon system, which is himself, is kind of like failing. There are times in the book where I was literally like, I think I texted you, it's like, is Squirt gonna die? Like, are you done? And
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, it was just an aspect of the story that I really wanted to explore, and I don't, there has to be skin in the game. People have to realize that when the hero gets hurt on page 500 of one book, on page 1 of the next book, he's not, dancing around and everything's cool. There's a fantastic series called The Punisher with John Bernthal, I think his name is. He's a terrific actor. It's a superhero thing, but he's basically a real guy, and he suffers so many wounds through the course of the Netflix series. It's a fantastic series. He suffers these wounds. I mean, he's shot in the back, he's shot with a crossbow and all this, and the next week he's okay, but they pull it off because the writing is so good and his acting is so good that you feel every bit of the pain that he's going through when he's going through it. So as a viewer, you see the skin in the game. You see the ramifications and the danger that your hero's in. Even if he's not, even if his heart's not going to flatline, you see the suffering he's going through. But it takes really good writing, and in that case, it takes good acting. So, it's just another aspect of the story. When you write 10 of these, as I have, and hope to write 10 more in the next 10 years, you want to do something different with each book to make it different and fun.
Here's a great question from Teresa. I've asked myself this many times. Will Gray Man ever come to Memphis or meet a central character from Memphis?
I got asked that. I was doing a local TV show, like a lunchtime TV, like news show. And usually how these things work is they go to commercial, they bring you out there, they mic you up really quick, and then the anchor or whoever's going to interview you talks to you for like 15 seconds, and boom, they go back live, and then they talk like they know everything about you. And I respect that ability. But at the same time, the anchor was like, he looks at the book for the first time, and they're 20 seconds out, and he's like, so where does this take place? And I'm like, Sudan or wherever the heck that book was. And he's like, oh, okay. Is he going to be back in Memphis in the next book? And I was like, well, I don't know that he's ever been to Memphis. He's like, well, why hasn't he been to Memphis? And I'm like, well, it's not just, I'm from Memphis, but this isn't an
international hub.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, this isn't a cookbook about Southern cooking or barbecue or whatever. And this isn't about, my experience with Elvis when I was 4. This is like, this is just my own thing, right?
Yeah.
And he just did not have it. He just did not have his head wrapped around it. When we went back live, he was still not understanding that this was something that started, continued, and ended somewhere out of town. I can't say that he'll never be in Memphis. I mean, you write what you know to a large degree, and there absolutely could be something here. The hero is from northern Florida, which is where I made him from. So he's been to the South before, not this part of the South.
All right, and I think we're getting close to the end, but I'm gonna ask a couple more questions until she like busts in and kicks us out.
She's gonna kick us out. Kat is gonna kick us out.
It's your show.
We're gonna get bounced. Yeah.
Oh, whatever. She's the host now. It says. Are we done? Oh, there she is.
Well, and it didn't happen until a couple minutes ago, but my Zoom started cutting out. And so maybe that is the weather god's way of telling us to wrap up.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if my Zoom quits if everyone gets kicked off, but it is 7, a little after. So if that's okay.
You got to be home.
Right. Have to go into the next room.
We all do. We all do.
Tom Colgan raised his hand. Tom, I feel like we have to allow Tom to.
I don't see where he's raising his hand.
Maybe I can't see. Let's see if he has a question. Tom had a question.
We already got one of his questions. Who is this guy?
False alarm. Well, thank y'all so much. I'm sorry for the abrupt ending. I was trying to show myself on video and it kept cutting out. So I was a little scared there for a minute. This was so much fun and I'm not at all surprised, but thank y'all so much for being here, both of you.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot, Josh, and thanks, Kat, for hosting us again.
Well, y'all can.
No problem. Those are great questions.
It was a great crowd, great questions. I wasn't sure if the weather was going to affect attendance too much. People trying to rush to heat their pipes up and everybody's internet acting squirrely, but it was a great crowd, great questions, great conversation. Y'all can pick up signed copies of both of these fellas' books at Novel. I put links in the chat. You can search them on our website, pick them up in the store, give us a call. We do what we can. We have been closed this week, so when we open up again, we'll be able to fill any orders. But anyway, thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And
thanks for
always
tuning
a pleasure. It's a great book.
Thanks a lot, Josh.
All righty.
Bye.
Bye-bye.